Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. All right. Hello and welcome everybody to this next episode of the Revenue Rewired podcasts. For any new listeners, we are breaking down systems that drive predictable B2B revenue growth. And I am half of the hosts today. Jay is not with us today. However, I have a very special guest, Cailean Bailey. Hi, Cailean. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm so good. So I'd love to introduce you because you're awesome. Talent acquisition leader based in Phoenix, Arizona, and you have a fascinating background. I've loved your LinkedIn post, by the way, on the whole, what was it, going from like Target to CEO series. That was hysterical, where you talked about coaching collegiate athletes before transitioning into scaling revenue teams and global recruiting, which is pretty impressive. So, welcome to the show. And I'm so excited to talk to you today about revenue and how it ties into recruiting. So, what we're really, part of this podcast is getting a little more outside of sales and marketing, but I think there are underappreciated forms of revenue growth. And one of those is hiring mistakes and how they cost a boatload of money. And I know you have seen a ton of that. You've experienced it on all sides. And I would love to ask you maybe, what kinds of errors and hiring mistakes have you seen most C-suite executives do or like that they're guilty of? What kind of comes to the surface as something that just is really unfortunately common?
And it is super common. And everything that I'll say here today is real life. I've experienced it. I've seen it. I've been party to it. I've also been able to kind of right the ship in some ways to correct it. But one of the main things that I've seen is when the process is sort of just thrown to the side. Like processes exist for a reason. Talent acquisition teams exist for a reason. It's designed to be a structured, in my case, I build competency-based hiring models where we're hiring based on a set of functional and behavioral competencies, core value alignment, things like that. When the process is circumvented, it almost never works. And there's a couple of reasons why executives or anybody in a hiring authority would do that. They're like, I got a good feeling. Unfortunately, as a talent acquisition leader, gut feeling is not a very valuable metric. It is a metric of something. It is a feeling, but you can't really quantify that. But you hear a lot of people say, I have a gut feeling, and generally, like it's pretty safe. Like, but you have to keep that objectivity in your hiring process. I once heard a quote from a recruiting leader that said, "If you make hiring decisions with your gut, you're gonna have a stomach ache." Um, I think processes are critical. So
Well,
when
why
when
is it
some
that you think they're trying to circumvent the process? Like, is it truly they feel like their gut or that they're annoyed by the process? Like, to your point, I've seen that a lot too. And I've never really thought about like, why is it that they try so hard to circumvent that process?
well, because they're confident. I mean, they're confident in themselves. They're confident in their abilities, and they maybe interview someone that says exactly what they need, and they didn't actually go through and vet the how uh, someone will do that or validate or verify that they have done that. In some ways, those things are touched on in an interview loop. But the other thing too is like they want something solved pretty quickly, generally, and they want somebody to come in and make an impact very quickly. And we know that it takes months for someone to really get ramped up. So they first have to audit and learn the business. So, but when an executive is excited and they get a good sense of somebody, they may think we can just skip the last part of the process or skip references or circumvent something, an assessment or some kind of pressure test, which I suspect we'll touch on later, where they're just like, I got a good feeling about this. And we've done it. I've done it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and it makes you wonder, like, had I actually objectively ran a full search, multiple people, multiple finalists, and whatever your processes are around assessment or case study or something like that, what could we have actually gotten from this person or from this search? So I think there's an excitement to it as well. I mean, I can speak for CEOs I've worked for in the past. Like, they're excited, they're visionaries, they're creative, they're high intensity, high energy people, and they want to wrap it up. Let's get it. All right, this is the person. Let's get him in. um, at the end of the day, it's all calculated risk. Like, you really don't know as much about anything until that person actually gets in the seat and starts operating. So I try to build recruitment processes and hiring processes and interview loops that will hopefully be able to um, really tease out those key competencies, um, like the situational judgment awareness, like and also their experience, like, have they done it, and let's lean into that. And also building out real world scenario questions, like, let's take things that they're actually going to experience in the job and ask them questions and how they would do A, B, or C. It tends to work fairly well.
It's almost like you're optimizing a team as you're recruiting. And, maybe from your perspective too, talking a little bit on the dollars and cents side of it, because, you and I were chatting before the show about, okay, recruitment and retention, and how is that a revenue piece? And Rob and I talked about that a couple weeks ago. But from your perspective, how are you seeing like revenue tie into recruitment and retention from your perspective?
Yeah. And I think that one thing that you'll hear a lot of recruiting leaders or recruiting teams say is that they'll try to make the argument that recruiting is not a cost center. It is revenue generating. Objectively, like, we can't change the gap, generally accepted accounting principles, and how things are coded, but we can work to find those people that really level up and can generate. And I think when you obviously we're talking about revenue, we're not always talking about net new sales. We're talking about people that can save us money. I've worked in a marketing environment, a very marketing specific environment for the last 5 years, and we hired a marketing leader that has significantly reduced our ad spend whilst keeping the lead generation and the leads coming into the sales team high. So that is, I think we tend to think about net new, like when we're hiring salespeople, which is certainly valuable. And if you get the right salespeople that can do well, yeah, of course you're going to get more revenue. However, recruiting is objectively, it costs a lot of money to recruit. When you think about a bad hire, you're not just talking about like salary and dollars that are being wasted. You're also talking about like the opportunity cost against other people and their time and training and onboarding. And if you sink a lot of their time in, like, that's where these big numbers, like $250,000 hiring mistake, you're talking about systems, tools, time, energy, effort, like all these things that on paper like might take a few extra steps to really quantify. It has a massive impact, like outsized impact on what it costs versus what it costs to actually hire that person. But at the end of the day, like, recruiting teams are going to function. They're going to be treated like a cost center. However, they have the ability to find, source, and hire people that are. It can be incredibly beneficial to the overall revenue growth of the organization. So I always make the argument that, if me or my team finds a sales rep that hits 200% of quota, I mean, who found them? But that's also me being like competitive and like
That's the
flexing that
coach in
muscle.
you. It's
That's the
it's
coach in
always
me.
there.
Yeah, yeah. But it's
Well,
that
I
is
bet that
nice to
number's
say.
higher in certain role sectors too, right? Like that's probably just a maybe a general average for several mid-market businesses, but 250 is low if you're talking about a leadership hire that's not right, or a very heavy sales or marketing focused role.
And there's unquantifiable mm, things that go in there too, like team morale, like retention. Does that impact other people in the business? Like, are they on their third or fourth boss or something like that? Like those things have a knock on effect too. But I also think that if you do make a bad hire, like and you can objectively show early on that this is not the right hire and that it's justified, then I think that you shouldn't wait to make a move, because the longer it goes, every day, every minute really is costing money, and somebody is probably going to have to pick up the slack somewhere, and that's where this opportunity cost comes in, because now that person is having to take on one and a half or two roles or functions of a role, whilst trying to do their own. And that could be a huge knock on effect there.
So do you think in your experience or, your peer group, is there an ROI on, revenue impact with recruitment and retention?
Yeah. This is easier in some functions than others, but in the talent acquisition world and the talent management world right now, what we're seeing is a big emphasis on quality of hire. So that is a metric that has like really been front and center, I would say, in the last 12 months in the recruiting space. I've seen it at conferences. I've seen it very prevalent on LinkedIn, because I think we're starting to see the older, not to say they're not important, but legacy metrics that are often built out by people who aren't in recruiting functions, of like time to hire, time to fill. Those are valuable, because if it's really long, that costs money, it costs energy. Why aren't we getting this role filled? And then these time-based metrics, like if you do find that sales rep that does hit 100% over quota, like, do you really care that it took an extra week and a half to hire them? Probably not. So we're also seeing talent acquisition teams being condensed. And so people like me are starting to blend into talent as a whole. And that includes talent acquisition on the top of the funnel in the front end, but also talent management. What happens when we're in there? If we're just hiring people and they're coming into the business and we don't really know how they're doing, we don't know how to replicate a pattern when we go to market and try to find another person for that role, or how would I say, like a complementary role to that person. Like maybe they need help in a certain area. So we're starting to track 30, 90, 180, and 365-day quality of hire, where in certain go-to-market functions, there's pretty binary metrics that you could follow. Like, are they hitting quota or are they not? Have they reduced our customer acquisition cost by X? Like that's just data. Um, on the product side of the business, which is also a big part of my career, is how quickly are they, fixing bugs? Like, how quickly are they impacting things like platform uptime or downtime? Are they, there's things called pull requests. Like, how many of these are they hitting per day, per week, per month? Like, these are things that keep the product going. And you can certainly quantify those as well. But in generally speaking, like, if a company over the last year or two hasn't been hiring that much, you need to really make sure that who you have coming in and who you have already in are hitting those business metrics, those business goals, whatever those look like.
It's amazing to me that you're not only talking about bringing the right person on, but that they not only now are doing their job, but they're doing their job efficiently and effectively, which is so holistic and I think so amazing, because obviously doing that part well helps avoid rework, which in and of itself is a huge revenue impact piece right there. You know, to your point about, investing in the wrong person and the downstream domino effect of a disastrous hire. I mean, you end up having to unpack so much. And then unfortunately, you're left with a little bit of PTSD. And I think that has an unspoken impact where, one of the quarterly meetings we had with our facilitator, he was talking about that, like this revenue cycle that's driven by recruitment. And what happens is you have this bad hire and you go do the opposite thing. And then you get through this honeymoon phase, they do something, and you're like, oh man, this isn't going to work. Now I'm going to go hire the opposite of this person. And it just continues ad infinitum, this awful cycle. Whereas what you're doing is getting so deep into how are they doing their job? What is it they need to succeed? What other people can help support them? So it's such a holistic business operating system coming from, frankly, I think one of the most foundational pieces, which you have the work and then you need people to do the work, and you have people buying the work. And I
Mhm.
think businesses overcomplicate some of this stuff. And to be fair though, recruiting is so stinking hard. Like I could use expletives. It is one of the hardest parts of my job. You're amazing at yours, but man, it is hard. Why is it like has any of this metric adjustment and the focus on being more ingrained in the work and the people, has that made your job easier, harder? Can't say.
Well, I don't think it's ever going to be easy. um, there are certain things that make it easier, like your employer brand, your consumer brand as well. Certainly impact those things, but it is never going to be like post a job, perfect person comes in, or
I don't
send
know if
an
that makes me
email.
feel better or worse right
Like,
now.
yeah, and we've all had scenarios where like we interview two people and one of them's perfect, and we've interviewed 100 people and none of them are perfect. Is it makes think is they're perfect? So what we're trying to do is work to find out what in our environment, in our team, with under our leadership, what is working and what is not. And so when you like, let's take a go-to-market sales rep role. That is a role that, based on I haven't been able, I haven't debunked this yet, or nobody's debunked this yet, but everybody wants to replicate their highest performing sales rep. Maybe there's some personality changes or differences there, but generally speaking, if you have a sales rep that is hitting a multiple on their quota, you want more of them. So that's one that you basically recognize a pattern and you replicate the pattern when you go out to market. And you can say, this person reminds me of this because they've done A, B, and C, and then you can align background and things like that. But at the same time, like what you're doing is you're still indexing on the overall competencies of these individuals. Like if you post a role and you don't know what five functional competencies and five behavioral competencies you want, like you're gonna be like moving the goalpost as you talk to people. And that's not the end of the world, but it's not like you can't really, I mean, I'm a soccer guy. Like it's hard to hit a moving goal. So the same is true when you're recruiting. Like, so knowing like that more holistic, deeper impact that these people have at 30, 90, 180 days, it allows you to replicate or add a complementary person to that role based on what the team dynamic or the company dynamic is. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to rain on your parade, but yeah, recruiting is never going to be perfectly easy. It's not
Dang
even
it,
easy
man.
for the big like we tend to look at these FANG companies or MANG companies or whatever, and we think like they've got it all figured out. I've been in rooms with them, and I'm like, they're dealing with the same stuff I am. It's just with a big brand name attached to it versus a startup or a scale up or series CUD, whatever. They are all fighting the same battles. It's just they're doing it on a bigger scale, and they maybe have more people coming to them. Whereas in the environments I've been in, like we are putting our reticle on a very specific profile and trying to pull those people in, both through talent attraction, so job boards, as well as direct sourcing. So going after specific profiles via LinkedIn, email, and general sourcing things.
I think that's one of the most missed opportunities for companies is creating, ICPs or customer profiles for their hires versus just their customers or clients, because obviously one of the R's being recruitment and retention, you should definitely have some sort of profile of who you're bringing on. Couple that with an excellently written, very focused job description at the most basic level that leadership agrees upon, and they have what's your most critical outcome? What are they responsible for? Is everyone aligned without kind of those two pieces, I feel like so much money gets wasted. And frankly, it kind of burns your brand bridge when I see candidates, for some reason, I don't know about you, but it was probably like 8 months ago. LinkedIn was rife with people complaining about how long the process was, that they'd get drug along to the end. Employers were just so slow to respond, or basically like they'd get to the very end and go, well, we didn't really have a role for you anyways, but thanks so much for your time. And it's like time is money, and your brand can be burned by someone who doesn't even work there.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, things are so visible, and people are so. It's so much easier to be vocal about those scenarios, and so I think we're starting to see a blend of your recruitment brand, or as we call like the employee employer value proposition, rather, and the consumer brand. Like if you interviewed at a company, um, I don't want to use a name, but if I interviewed at a company that makes like a soda and they treated me like crap and they never got back to me, like I would probably switch to the other brand. um, and that has become very visible because there is a greater supply of really good candidates on the market right now, that are very, very talented and capable, that aren't getting jobs because of market dynamics and macroeconomic conditions right now. I think it will. I think it's trending towards some positive data there over the last quarter. But you're right. Um, you have to treat. I, I don't. I don't want to prescribe what others should do, but like I want to treat candidates as our customer. I want to treat our hiring teams as our customer of the TA team, the same way that an internal agency would treat its different business units as their customers for from a marketing standpoint. So I highly, highly, highly recommend a book called Be Our Guest, which is basically Disney's guide to customer service in book form. It's phenomenal, and it will help you
I'm taking notes,
understand.
by the way, for our
Yeah,
next book club.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you could read it. You could read it in an afternoon. It's 130 pages or something like that. But basically, it's like surprise and delight. I talk about it all the time. If anybody goes down a rabbit hole and listens to my some of the presentations I've done, surprise and delight. Like, and it's so easy to do. Be honest, be transparent, be upfront, talk about the hard things early, like salary, and be transparent about that if that's your company's policy. I realize not everyone does, but all of a sudden you've created this trust of like, no matter what happens to you in this process, I will tell you that, unfortunately, in the recruiting landscape is an outlier, and that should be the norm. The people that ghost or string you along, that should be that should be the outlier, not the opposite. I think right now it's never been easier to create a good recruiting process that is memorable. But I also think you hit on something, Sarah, here that I like to talk about is like, who is the ideal candidate profile? Marketing teams and sales teams build out their ideal customer profile. Why? Because they're going to be spending dollars to advertise to that person. Like recruiting teams are doing the exact same thing. Like I literally have a demand gen tool that I use to attract talent and make sure that my and our job ads are in front of the right types of people. So I like to think like a marketer in that regard. What is captivating to somebody that's scrolling through dozens, if not hundreds, of jobs online? Like what piques their interest? A lot of times, a really strong consumer brand can do that. Other times, it's a simple hook inside of the first couple lines of a job description, and that really brings people's interest level in, and then you get them in, and you start to set the stage with this honest, transparent, very high touch, in my case, environment where they're like, okay, no matter what happens, I had a good experience here, and maybe I'd want to work there in the future, or maybe I would refer a friend to work here as well.
It is amazing that for something that can cost so much money and time, that more businesses don't invest in a good process and aligning on their desired outcomes for it in advance. It's like we talk about marketing metrics, customer lifetime value, customer acquisition cost. And it's like, what's your candidate acquisition cost? What maybe knowledge is power. So I don't know about your key takeaway for our listeners, but if I had to say one takeaway after our chat, I think because the ones who are signing the checks seem to care a lot when the numbers are put in front of them. And this probably wouldn't have been what I would have said at the beginning of the call, but I would say figuring out where you're leaking or hemorrhaging, hopefully not, but probably revenue in your recruitment and retention cycle would be probably enough to get your butt moving. But I don't know what your advice would be. Like, if someone had no clue where to start and they're hearing this and they're like, a CEO, I don't even know where we're at, what would you give them advice on what to do next?
Oof. Um, you in recruiting, you have to. I'll use. Actually, don't know if it's a Disney reference, but I think it might be. You have to kiss a few frogs to find your prince, kind of thing. So objectively in recruiting, you tell exponentially more people no than you do yes, but oftentimes it's those no's that you interact with that get you to that yes or that hell yes. Um, so you have to be okay with talking to a lot of different types of people and profiles, even ones that you don't think match perfectly, because I don't think there is an absolute perfect match. If you're able to, it also depends on where you're at in the company. Like the company I worked at for the last 5 years, we were in a very different place, and so I was in that scenario where I was working right alongside the executive team. Like we are trying to find this very specific profile to do something related to our platform or uh, marketing or demand gen or revenue operations is a very new and hot kind of role that we've seen a lot of those types of roles pop up. Spend the time on the front end before you even think about clicking send or spending $1 to advertise that, to make sure that you have the job ad refined that also reflects your culture, but also showcases what you want that person to do. People are motivated by the impact that they can make and what they're building, either from a technology standpoint or from a revenue standpoint. If you're in sales, obviously you want to build big sales. Marketing, you want to show really good data and show that you grew the company from A to B or you reduced this or whatever. So like show that. Like people want that. Like don't skimp on a good job ad. Like be thorough. And then secondary to that, the it shouldn't be a 10-step process and it shouldn't be a two-step process. Like add a couple people in there that you think can objectively check and balance each other and give them very specific focus areas. Give them very specific competencies that they want to look at. So if it's a peer, you're looking at collaboration, communication, things like that. If it's a leader, you're looking at growth potential, curiosity. It's a huge predictor of success. Um, Align on the process as best you can. And that way, when you come back around to talk about the candidate pool, you have like, okay, you were focused on this. Tell me about this. You were focused on this. Tell me about this. And so you get all these people that can have this conversation and ask questions of each other to create a dialogue. So have all of that ready to go before your first interview and be prepared to talk often about calibrations. Um, what you liked, what you didn't like, because you may talk to several people that you didn't like objectively for the role, but they may have guided you towards something that you realize you actually wanted. And then
Yeah,
the
because you
same,
don't know what you don't know, right? Like sometimes
yeah,
that was a great piece of advice you're giving is it is an iterative process.
it is yeah, it's highly iterative. I mean, it's the same principles of building software. Like you build it, you iterate, you're going to build. I mean, at Design Pickle, where I've been for the last 5 years, it is exactly like software. Version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, but it's just with our recruiting. team, our tech, our people, our processes. Like we are constantly iterating on those.
Let's
And
just
what,
not call
well,
our
yeah,
next candidate profile beta test Betty. Let's.
right. Yeah. Well, all recruiting, all first 30 days of recruiting and hiring in some ways is a beta test to see if it is going to work.
Well, and I think that's helpful for people to hear, So if you're struggling out there in this space, we totally hear you. And you can always reach out to Cailean. I've got all the show notes and his LinkedIn profile, and he's just a super nice and helpful guy. And, you know, I think I like having this topic as part of revenue because it goes so deep. You and I could keep talking forever on this.
Mhm.
So I'd love if anyone has any follow-up questions. It'd be awesome. But any final notes for our humble audience?
It doesn't have to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but before you post anything publicly, make sure that you have a really good idea of what you're looking for. And recruiting and hiring is not something that you can just wing and riff and use your gut on. The more objective data you can add into this process, the higher the probability of a successful hire will be.
Oh my gosh, so well said. Well, thank you so much, sir. This was an amazing chat. I have nothing to add. That was stupendous. And before my next recruiting binge, I'll be giving you a call. All
You
right.
know where
Well,
to find
thank you,
me.
every. I do, I do. Well, thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.